said women couldn't keep a steady trigger when it mattered. They said a woman behind a scope would fold the moment the pressure turned up. Staff Sergeant Lena Corso heard those words the way she heard mirage on a hot day, a wavering distortion that meant nothing to the fundamentals. She stood on a Marine Corps range in 29 Palms that morning, assigned as a safety officer while a battalion-level sniper course ran its final stage. 12 shooters had come to test themselves. 3 were gunning for the record. The course demanded one unblinking truth: 103 targets in 40 minutes, no misses. Miss once and you were out. The early shooters chased the clock and felt the range chew them up. One made it to 71 before a pair of misses ended his run. Another fell apart when heat and haste shifted his point of impact after rapid strings without cooling. The favorite, the loudest, the most certain, reached 82 hits before the pressure unstitched him. He slammed his rifle down, red-faced and spitting curses, and called out loud enough for everyone to hear that women couldn't shoot worth a damn under pressure. The murmur rolled across the line like a silk flag. Major Petrie, in charge of the course, paused. Lena, 20 feet away by the safety shack, heard it all. She met Petrie's eyes, packed her calm, and walked to the firing line. He checked her credentials. She'd been a scout sniper for years, a marksmanship instructor now, range certified and serving that very morning. He raised an eyebrow when she asked to borrow Kulich's M40A6 and attempt the same course. He could have laughed her off. He didn't. He gave the command, and the clock started. Lena set the rifle into her shoulder the way she had practiced before the sun rose on desert mornings, and before convoys ever called for eyes on a compound. Her hands were steady because practice had replaced panic. She kept the same ritual on every shot: acquire, read the wind, adjust, breathe, press. Her mind was as quiet as her father's workshop back in the Ozarks, the place that taught her to read mirage instead of gossip, to translate temperature and humidity into 1,000-yard math before breakfast. He had handed her tools and space to learn, and she had filled both with patience. Targets came at 200, 250, 300 meters, and then farther, changing diamonds of threat that punished impatience. When the wind flirted with the flags and dust scudded across the berm, she waited. When mirage suggested a left drift, she corrected. When the sun slid lower and the last plates took the light at 500, 550, 600 meters, she took her time. The rifle became extension and calculator. The sequence was simple and relentless. As shots rang out, the line fell silent. Marines who had laughed earlier now watched a cadence they recognized. One breath, one press, each outcome binary and absolute. At 30 targets, she was still perfect. At 50, Petrie's scorecard thickened with impressed ticks. At 85, the gusts came and she let them pass. At 90, the clock read 10 minutes and her rhythm never broke. By the time she slotted the final rounds into the last small plates under a shifting crosswind, the range held its breath with her. When the last steel rang, she cleared the rifle and rose. 103 targets, 40 minutes, 0 misses. The silence after that sort of run is not empty. It's full of recalculation. Petrie walked up, checked the scorecard, and called it the cleanest run he'd seen in 15 years. The man who'd taunted her stood with his face unreadable, then crossed the distance and extended a hand. He said he had been out of line. He said he was sorry. Lena took his hand and said the important thing was what you learned from the day, not how loudly you declared victory. That day did not become a trophy shelf for Lena. She had a record and a past that mattered more than applause. 8 years in the infantry, scout sniper designation, 2 deployments where the line between precision and life had been thin as a leading edge. She'd spent nights on Overwatch, once taking over after a team leader was medevaced and quietly removing threats at 400 meters while radios screamed and vehicles rolled under fire. She'd stabilized convoys, kept troops alive, earned commendations she mentioned only when asked. None of that explained her to the men who assumed she was untested. It taught her to ignore assumptions and execute fundamentals. Major Petrie did more than congratulate. He initiated a billet recommendation, a package to move her to Quantico as an instructor at the Scout Sniper School. Teaching there would mean shaping doctrine, bringing field-hardened habits into the schoolhouse, proving by action that marksmanship has no gender requirement. Lena weighed the choice, thinking about long hours and the responsibility of shaping young shooters. She accepted. At Quantico, she found a class of 24 students and the same old skepticism and new faces. Two of the students were women. The rest watched closely. Lena didn't argue. She demonstrated. She taught wind calls the way her father had taught wind calls, as a sequence of observable cues and practical corrections. She taught breathing and trigger press, fieldcraft and patience, and she did it on the firing line, not from a podium. By the end of the first month, the skepticism had thinned into respect. Her students learned because she could outshoot most of them and break complex problems into clear, repeatable steps. They learned that composure under pressure is a practiced muscle, not a birthright. The man who had mocked her reached out months later, asking for advice on wind reading. Lena sent him references, field manual notes, and the short lessons that made the difference between lucky hits and reliable outcomes. They traded messages, and in the small ways that matter, the culture shifted. Her father came once to visit the school, older but sharp-eyed. He fired a few strings on an M40 and smiled when his shots landed. He told her he was proud. The words were steady and true, without the fanfare she never wanted. Lena's work became a quiet argument. Fundamentals, discipline, experience. She taught that anyone who could do the job should do it, because lives on the line do not care about assumptions. She taught that mastery is built from repetition and humility, that a rifle is indifferent to the person who shoulders it, that the only thing that matters at the end of the day is whether the target was engaged when it needed to be. The story didn't end with one perfect run. It fed forward into classes, into students who learned to read mirage and dust, into commanders who watched performance and adjusted policies. It mattered because it was real practice in front of real consequences. And for Lena, the lesson she taught others was the one she had learned herself. Quiet focus beats loud certainty. Method beats rhetoric. And the work, the unglamorous, repetitive, exacting work, is the only proof anyone ever needs.